This man had changed Malaysia forever.
He says the failure Muslims and Muslim societies and movements is that they only reflect the past and the present.
This man had changed Malaysia forever, from prison to power. How Anwar Ibrahim changed Malaysia. Stay tuned to find out. He was jailed, humiliated, declared finished, once Malaysia's rising star, then its most famous political prisoner. For decades, Anwar Ibrahim stood at the edge of power, only to be betrayed, beaten, and locked away. But today, he's no longer in a cell. He's sitting in the most powerful seat in Putrajaya, Prime Minister of Malaysia. This isn't just a comeback. It's the most dramatic political redemption in modern Asian history. From the halls of UMNO to the depths of solitary confinement to reshaping Malaysia's destiny. This is the story of Anwar Ibrahim and how he changed Malaysia forever. Chapter 1. The birth of Malaysia's Reformist Parti Keadilan Rakyat. Before the prison bars and the protests, Anwar Ibrahim was Malaysia's golden boy, a firebrand student activist in the 1970s. He fought against poverty, corruption, and injustice, even landing in jail for it once. But his talents didn't go unnoticed. In 1982, the unthinkable happened. He joined UMNO, Malaysia's ruling party, and under Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, Anwar rose faster than anyone expected. Education Minister, Finance Minister, Deputy Prime Minister. He was being groomed for the top job. By the mid-1990s, Anwar was a global darling, praised by the IMF Time magazine. World leaders, young, charismatic, clean, but behind the scenes, tension was brewing. Anwar's push for reform against cronyism and government excess was winning public praise, but ruffling feathers in high places. Then came 1998. The Asian financial crisis hit. Anwar pushed for transparency, reform, and cuts. Mahathir said no, and just like that, it all unraveled. Anwar was sacked, arrested, paraded in court with a black eye, charged with sodomy and corruption, in what many saw as a political hit job. The man once destined to lead was now behind bars. But outside, the streets erupted. Reformasi, 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 they chanted. From the anger and injustice, a new force emerged. Parti Keadilan Rakyat, the People's Justice Party, born from pain, built on hope. And Anwar, even from prison, became a symbol. Chapter 2. Behind the iron bars of Sungai Buloh, beyond defeat. They tried to end his career with a trial. They tried to break his spirit with a cell. But even behind bars, Anwar Ibrahim was never truly silenced. In 1999, he was locked away inside Sungai Buloh prison, Malaysia's most notorious detention center. His crime, officially corruption and sodomy, unofficially challenging power. The conditions were harsh. He was kept in solitary confinement. At one point, he was badly beaten. The image of his black eye, seen as a symbol of state abuse, went viral before viral even existed. But while the walls closed in around him, the world was watching. Amnesty International declared him a prisoner of conscience. Human Rights Watch called the trial a charade. From Washington to London, world leaders condemned Malaysia's actions. Even the United Nations stepped in, ruling his detention a violation of international law. And yet, years passed. Inside prison, Anwar studied, reflected. Outside, a movement was growing, fueled by his message. Reformasi was no longer just a protest. It was an awakening. Released in 2004 after Malaysia's highest court overturned his sodomy conviction. Anwar emerged physically weakened, but politically reborn. Banned from politics, he began again, slowly, strategically. He built coalitions, spoke in rural towns, listened more than he spoke. But in 2015, the government came for him again. Another sodomy conviction, another prison term, this time, again, Sungai Buloh. Yet the world had changed. This time, Barack Obama's administration publicly raised concerns. Global media framed his imprisonment not as justice, but as political sabotage. And while Anwar sat behind bars, his ideas marched on, with others now carrying the Reformasi banner. He had become more than a politician. He was a symbol of resistance, of dignity, of a Malaysia that refused to stay silent. Chapter 3, The Pact That Shook Malaysia, Rise of Pakatan Harapan. They called it impossible. Two former enemies. One, a veteran statesman. The other, a reformist once jailed by his hand. Mahathir Mohamad and Anwar Ibrahim forged an alliance that stunned the world and gave birth to a new coalition, Pakatan Harapan, the Alliance of Hope. Their target, Najib Razak, the sitting prime minister engulfed in the global 1MDB corruption scandal. Billions of Malaysian ringgit vanished, from Manhattan penthouses to Hollywood films, even a luxury yacht, all allegedly funded with money meant for the people. Malaysia was on the brink, and Mahathir, at age 92, emerged from retirement not to reclaim power, but to pass it on. The strategy was bold. Unite the opposition, rally the people, defeat Barisan Nasional, and pave the way for Anwar's return. Even behind bars, Anwar's influence fueled the movement. On May 9th, 2018, Malaysians made history. Pakatan Harapan swept to victory, ending 61 years of UMNO rule. Mahathir became prime minister once more, and within days, Anwar Ibrahim walked free, granted a royal pardon, and greeted by cheers from across the nation. It was a moment of triumph, but behind the celebrations, shadows lingered, because in politics, alliances are made for battles, but not always for peace. And as Anwar waited for his promised turn, the real test of loyalty and legacy was just beginning. Chapter 4, The Sheraton Move, Malaysia's Prime Minister at last. It was supposed to be smooth. A promise had been made. Mahathir would lead, but only for a while. Then he'd pass the baton to Anwar Ibrahim. But months passed, then years, and the handover never came. Anwar waited, Malaysia waited, and behind closed doors, politics churned. Then came Langkah Sheraton, the Sheraton Move, a late-night political betrayal that collapsed the government and ended Pakatan Harapan's rule. Overnight, Mahathir resigned. A backdoor coalition took power, and once again, Anwar was left in the cold. What followed was a series of fragile governments, each more unstable than the last. But Anwar didn't give up. Pakatan Harapan regrouped. He rebuilt alliances, gained trust, and bided his time. Then, in 2022, Malaysia's general election delivered a shocking result. A hung parliament. No party had a clear majority. Malaysia teetered on uncertainty, and the king stepped in. After intense negotiations, Anwar Ibrahim, at long last, was sworn in as the 10th Prime Minister of Malaysia, from solitary confinement in Sungai Buloh prison to the highest office in Putrajaya. It was a journey of 24 years, marked by trials, exile, betrayal, and belief. But now, the real work begins, because reform is easy to promise, harder to deliver. Chapter 5, Redefining Malaysia Economic Future. The battle to reach Putrajaya was long, but now Anwar Ibrahim faces a greater challenge, changing Malaysia from within. His government, a unity coalition of former rivals, is unprecedented. Support comes from both sides of the aisle, which means compromise is constant, but so are expectations. Anwar has promised a new Malaysia, one that is multiracial, fair, and free from corruption. His first targets: institutional reform, economic inequality, the bloated civil service, and a judiciary still shadowed by political influence. He's launched anti-corruption crackdowns, even reviving investigations linked to 1MDB and the scandals of Najib Razak. He's reshaping Malaysia's foreign policy too, balancing ties between China and the West while championing ASEAN unity. But not everyone is convinced. Then the unexpected news came out, Sarawak with it. Petros try to challenge Petronas dominance. Malaysia economy is in trouble. Petronas, Malaysia, Fortune 500 company may be vanished. 5,000 workers been laid off. What will happen to their families? What will happen to their kids? Watch this video to find out. I promise you that you will never believe it.